Hey guys, Dwayne here. Today I wanted to talk about tips for whenever you're initially getting your attorney and you're going through your divorce. This has come up a lot recently with a couple of different folks who are currently going through this or have just finished it. So I thought it would be important to talk about this again for anyone who is actually in the initial stage where you're still actually dealing with an attorney or you're getting an attorney and you're just starting out. Now, the first thing is, whatever attorney you pick, they work for you. But and that's okay. So that's obvious, right? Obviously you're paying them. But I think it's important to remember that because sometimes they get into these situations where they're kind of giving you decisions or ideas that's easy for them and they want to just settle it. And they're like throwing it out there to see if, in my opinion, they're throwing it out there to see if you're willing to agree with it and speed things up. Now, conversely, there's also attorneys that will manipulate you to try to suck as much money out of you as possible. So there's kind of a balance, and hopefully you can find an attorney with some integrity to where they're not just telling you what you want to hear and just running up the court costs and stuff like that. Now, when I say that they work for you, I know for me, in my situation, there were times where had I just let the attorney direct or guide me where we were going to go, I would have been in a much worse situation than I ultimately ended up with. Now, I was fortunate that my attorney wasn't what's the right word? He wasn't just trying to look for ways to maximize how much money he could get from me. So he wasn't trying to force going to court and stuff like that. So, and ultimately we only went to court a couple times, and typically what would happen is when a court date would come up, it would get pushed back and delayed. Now, they only follow your direction, right? So if they offer something like, hey, why don't you give the person all custody and give them more money than they really need? Not that they're going to say it that way. If you say, oh, okay, I'll do that, then they'll write it up, sign it, boom, and be done with it, and send you a bill. So you have to take an active role in the process. So and guys, I get it. It's stressful. You're completely overwhelmed, and the idea of basically handing it off to someone else and say, here, you deal with it, you figure it all out, and you let me know how it goes. Now, the problem with that is, that could bite you in the butt later, and it did me even though I was taking an active role, and that kind of rolls into my next point, which is creating a detailed parenting plan. Now, I think in another video I've talked about this, but this is where it also gets into where you take an active role. You need to know what you want first, right? You need to know what your going in position is. And typically, typically if you're in our situation, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that, if you're coming up from a normal perspective, you want your child to have a relationship with the other parent. So you're not actively going at it, trying to say that the other person's a horrible person and trying to get full custody, whether you're the dad or the mom, and saying that the other person is just horrible. Now, I guess in my case, that's what was being said about me. But I was like, my take on it was the kids need both parents. The kids need to have a relationship with both parents. Coming from a divorced family, I didn't have a relationship with my dad, and I didn't want to do that same thing to my kids. Now, obviously it would have been easier if I could have got full custody, but that's not what I was going for. I was going for joint 50-50. I erroneously thought that we were going to be able to work things out and co-parent and get along for the good of the kids. So as soon as you get any indication that you are in a high conflict divorce, and I think people will say high conflict divorce, and typically I think what it really means, but it's not really said, is that you are in a divorce with a narcissist which means that they are going to fight you on every step of the way, and they're not going to use any reason or anything like that. Now, this is where a detailed parenting plan is crucial. It is like super important. What am I, 15? Anyways, it's really important because everything you put in there is going to drive what happens later. Now, it doesn't mean that the ex isn't going to be able to take you back to court or, try to make things more complicated. But your best bet right out of the gate is to make sure that that plan covers everything. It covers, choices on schools. It covers vacation time. It covers transition times. I mean, think about, what time, if you're going to be working, what time, if it's in the summer and the kids aren't in school, how is that going to work? One of the best things I think I did initially, and when it got really weird, I was like, I didn't want to be around her. And there were, so I'm like, hey, I want to minimize any opportunity where I have to interact with her or be around her or anything like that. And I wanted the transitions to be at school, which in some ways that might be more complicated for the kids because they have to, during the school year, they're dealing with, if they want something that's at the other parent's house, it's complicated. But honestly, I tell you, at the end of the day, whenever it's your day to pick the kids up, whatever day it is, if you know that you're going to the school and they're going to be there and you don't have to worry about it, it's still a transition day, so it'll still be complicated, but it's just one more way to minimize the interaction that you have with the ex. And on that note, the other thing I would highly recommend is you put in there how communication is supposed to be done. Now, I didn't do that. Okay, it was recommended. They added. My attorney added in wording that said it is recommended that both parties utilize Our Family Wizard for communication or email. Well, Our Family Wizard costs money. Ex didn't want to pay any money for it, or she used that as an excuse. Well, I don't have any money, so I won't do it. And I probably should have just paid her half of it, but at that time I was so irritated and frustrated that I am not paying an extra dime that I needed to for it. Honestly, it was a method of gaslighting me and manipulating me and keeping me engaged longer, and so I basically did it to myself. But my point is write it in there. Say email or save Our Family Wizard. Now, the reason that I don't just say use email, and ultimately that's kind of what we do now. But initially, there were always problems. I didn't get your email. My emails crashed. It must have gone into my, my deleted, whatever. I mean, there was always an excuse why there was no way to confirm that communication was taking place. And honestly, all it was another gaslighting, manipulative technique to try to get me frustrated. And it worked, actually, annoyingly, but it did. So that's why I'm saying, so think about it now, right? Another example is, our birthdays, my birthday and my ex's birthday are really close. They're like 3 days apart. 3 days? Yeah, 3 days apart. Which is total pain because, the way it was written is, every year one of us would, every year, the parties whose birthday it is can see the kids on their birthday. Well, when it's that close, that means you can't plan anything. You can't say, okay, well, my vacation, mine happens to be in August, my vacation time, I will take, that and we'll go do something. Couldn't really do it because 3 days later, I'd have to be back to ensure that, that kids could see their mom. Not that I didn't want them to see their mom, but I mean, it's like, if you are okay with that, great. If you have a problem with that, you need to think about it. One of the things I was really fortunate that was put in the court order was a Christmas time that each, whoever, one person had the Christmas vacation and the other person would get to see him on Christmas Day. Had that not been written in there, every year she was going to take the kids someplace else. And the first year she tried to do that. And I think I talked about that before. So just try to forward think through the scenarios that might happen and what would you need to be put in there to protect you and to minimize conflict and to try to make sure that things, go as smoothly as possible. And the final thing I want to say is, don't rush into it. Don't just get into in a panic state to where you just want it done. Now, in my situation, what happened with that is, so the costs are going up. I was being brutalized with child support and alimony. Significantly so, and I wanted it to stop. So I had my incentive to finish things was to try to prevent that. To be perfectly honest, I should have fought a little bit longer, a little bit harder to make sure that things were written and flushed out just a tad bit more, because it would have saved me problems down the line. Now, I haven't gone back to court to fix those. The way I've looked at it is the framework that we have is good enough to not be worth spending thousands upon thousands of dollars. And think of stuff like where they're going to go to school, what happens if your career changes or whatever. Try to get some of that stuff in there, because what you don't see, because here's the problem is if it's specific enough to where the other party can say, oh, well, I'm not going to do that because the court order doesn't say that, then you're in a bind. But the problem is that conversely, a narcissistic person, if there is wiggle room in there to interpret it another way, they will do that. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. Just make sure, my main point is remember that your attorney works for you and take an active role in the process, because, if you don't, you can end up in a situation that you're going to be dealing with and living with, and ultimately probably having to go back and fight on later on down the road. And that's just a pain, and you don't really want to do that. So, all right. So on that, let's see here. If you have some experiences, how you've dealt with that, because I know everyone's a little different. I know my situation in some ways is better than other folks, and my situation is worse in some situations. It really depends, and everyone has their own experiences on this. But I would venture to guess that most folks would agree that what I'm telling you is pretty sound advice in this stage of the thing. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you like the channel, subscribe. I've said this before. Anyways, if you want to get a hold of me, there on the YouTube channel and the About page, there's links to stuff to connect with me if you want to. I've tried to connect with people through the YouTube stuff. It really doesn't work well. It's like if you understand what it is, it works okay. But if you haven't used it, it's a pain, and the notifications are weird and whatnot. But on that, I hope you guys are having a good day. If you're going through this, just take it slow. Don't rush into anything, and try to keep calm and try to work through or think through the different scenarios that you may have to go through. It's not going to be pleasant, but you know what? A little bit of pain now can save you some significant pain later. All right, on that, I'm going to wrap it up. Hopefully you guys having a good day, and I will talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.